Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to look and talk about the best settings to use in Fortnite. It's been a while since I took a step back and covered the basic in-game settings rather than advanced ones or Windows settings to help boost your FPS. Plus, I know a ton of you guys were curious about what in-game settings and sensitivities I use and recommend, so we'll also cover that today. I am a keyboard and mouse player on PC, but I'm gonna go over console and controller settings too, since I did play on PS4 for more than half a year. We have a lot of things to discuss, so let's start at the only place that makes sense to, your video settings. Beginning at the top with your windowed mode, you always want to be playing in full screen. Both windowed and windowed full screen give you more input lag than full screen mode. If you look at the description on the right, it even says the game will run slightly faster in full screen mode. So for the sake of better FPS and less input lag, play in full screen mode. Next is your display resolution. I'm on 1920 by 1080, which is default, but I know many pros that play on 1600 by 900 for better FPS. Both of these resolutions are 16 by 9 aspect ratios, so they're not stretch resolutions. The only difference between the two is 1600 by 900 has less pixels, so it will look a little blurrier. For those of you with less powerful PCs and who don't really care how high quality their game looks, 1600 by 900 or 1280 by 720 are great options. Now, frame rate limit. I always advise capping your FPS at the next highest value above your monitor's refresh rate. This explains why I cap my frames at 240. I play on a 240Hz monitor, and 240 is the highest FPS cap that Fortnite offers. If you play on a 144Hz monitor, then cap it at 160 or 180 frames. And if you're on a 60 or 75Hz monitor, cap it at 120. The reason you should do this is that you'll get less input lag, reduced screen tearing and stutters, and smaller FPS fluctuations when your FPS is capped. Moving on to 3D resolution, again, I play on native res, which is 1920 by 1080. This is what the majority of big streamers and content creators you know will all use. However, a ton of pro players, especially the EU pros like Mongrel, are using stretch resolutions. Currently, Mongrel uses 1798 by 1080, which you honestly cannot tell right away that it's a stretch resolution. The way the new stretch res works is you lose horizontal FOV instead of gaining vertical FOV. Why would you ever want to do that? Well, you gain FPS, making your game feel smoother, and it's better for box fighting since your enemies will appear slightly larger than on native. I use native because you guys know I'm a content creator, I'm a YouTuber before anything else. Plus, I don't really mind and I'm kind of used to 1920 by 1080. Next are your graphics settings. View distance I have on medium. I used to have it on epic, but it was hurting my FPS a little too much. If you guys didn't know, view distance only affects things like houses and natural structures. Enemies and enemies' builds will appear at the same distance regardless of what you have view distance set to. Next, shadows off because they're useless, they look ugly, and they make you lose frames. Anti-aliasing off, textures low, effects low, and post-processing low. For the same exact reasons. They hurt your performance. VSync, you want to have off in game. What it does is it synchronizes Fortnite's frame rate, aka your FPS, with your monitor's refresh rate for better stability. It does sound pretty good and pretty cool, but VSync through any in-game settings has the big problem of increasing input lag and making your game feel and run much slower. Motion blur you also want to have off unless you like giving yourself headaches. Motion blur makes it so anytime you move quickly around, the sequence of you moving is blurred out, making it hard to look at or even to play with since you will lose FPS as well. Last but not least, allow multi-threaded rendering I have on. A lot of you guys won't have this setting available simply because your CPU does not have the required amount of cores. Even if you do have the option though, it may actually not benefit you. My advice is to turn it on and then compare your FPS to when it's off. I have a pretty beefy PC and I get higher FPS with it on, so I leave it on. Basically, whichever results in higher FPS, use. Now, let's move on to sensitivity and game settings. I'm currently using 0.124 X and Y sense as well as 400 DPI. That's a relatively low sense, coming out to about 49 eDPI. You guys should know though, sensitivity is preference. Low sense is generally easier to get good on because you can hit your shots and track easier. You just need to have a larger mouse pad and aim mainly with your arm. For my ADS sense, I have it on 0.3 and my scope sense on 0.35. These are also pretty low just because I think it's easier to hit more shots from far away when my ADS and scope sense are really low. To find your perfect sensitivity, check out my guide on the PSA method. That was how I found my sensitivity and how many pros have as well. It basically uses your mouse pad and sensitivity preferences to find the most optimal sense given your setup. In my opinion, anything between 32 and 100 eDPI is what you want to aim for, where your eDPI is your in-game sense times DPI. As far as controller sensitivities go, again, it's all preference. I would recommend looking at players like Ghost Innocence, Ghost Assault, and Ghost Aiden. They're all top tier controller players who are much more knowledgeable regarding controller sensitivities. What I can help with though are both controller and mouse and keyboard game settings, starting with toggle sprint. Toggle sprint makes it so whenever you tap the sprint button, you sprint, and to stop sprinting, you tap it again. Not only is this just unoptimal in terms of movement, but the next setting we'll go over makes it completely useless, so turn toggle sprint off. That next setting is sprint by default, probably the most helpful setting in all of Fortnite. If you don't have sprint by default enabled already, I'm not even mad, I'm just disappointed. Not only does it help make your movement more consistent, but it opens up left shift or your thumbstick on controller as a keybind. Those keybinds are extremely optimal since you don't have to take any fingers off your movement keys to hit them. Even Mongrel, who was stubborn and had it turned off for months, finally turned sprint by default on. Next, sprint cancels reloading off. That would just be annoying if it was on. Tap to search or interact on. This is really helpful because instead of having to hold your interact key, you can just tap it and it will automatically open chests for you. The other thing is you need to have this enabled if you use scroll wheel up or down. Hold to swap pickup, I'd say have off because it can mess you up sometimes when the game is being weird. Reset building choice off for keyboard and mouse, but for controller, have it on. Because controller, you need to take your building menu out before selecting a build, making this really only useful for controllers. Toggle targeting off because we want to hold down our right click or left trigger to aim in and not tap to do that. Aim assist on, even though this is a controller setting, and I think we all know why it should be on. Edit mode aim assist, however, I've heard mixed opinions on. Most controller pros have it off and say it makes editing smoother when it's off, but you can probably try both and see what you like more. Turbo building on because we learned the hard way what it was like to have off about 2 weeks ago when Epic nerfed it. Controller auto run off. This is different than sprint by default and it gives you less control of your movement, which is a big no-no. Auto open doors you want on. This setting is really helpful when building and making quick edits. Even when you mess up and edit a door, you'll run straight through it without losing any momentum. Same thing for tunneling, which really helps in late game scrims and tournament matches. Auto pickup weapons I recently turned off. I used to be a big fan of it because it's really helpful for landing on weapons off spawn. However, the more I used it, the more annoying it was when I would loot and pick up random stuff. Auto sort consumables is another one you want on. This just puts any sort of heals to the right of your inventory by default when you pick it up. Builder Pro immediately on, so there's no delay while building on controller. And controller hold edit time on the default of 0.2. Lastly, make sure vibration is off, especially on controller as this can mess you up in fights. And record replays off for better FPS. I have mine on because I need it for videos, but if you want a solid little FPS boost on console and PC, turn it off. Brightness I have on 0.5, which is the default. I've never really felt the need to make it any dimmer or brighter. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, my keybinds. I don't think I've ever showed the full thing before. Not like they're a secret, it's just I've been way too lazy to show it. My general philosophy for building keybinds is to put as many binds as you can off your index and ring finger, and instead put them on your thumbs and pinky. If you can't put all of them off like me, put the remaining binds as close to WASD as possible on keybinds like Q, F, E, C, X, and V. My binds do a pretty decent job of this. They definitely could be more optimal, but my hand is kind of messed up, and I don't have a ton of time to switch things around while grinding out videos for you guys. I did kind of go out of order, but here are my audio settings. Nothing special or insane, it's all just preference and whatever helps you hear the best. The last bunch of settings we'll look at are the accessibility settings. For colorblind mode, I don't use any because I think it's the best looking for viewers. Competitively, I'd advise you guys to use Deuteranope 5 and above, so anywhere between 5 and 10, or Protanope 5 and above. The reason for that is those two colorblind modes help you see in the zone. Nearly every single pro player uses one of these two colorblind modes for that exact reason. It makes endgames when zones are closing in or simple storm fights a lot easier to deal with. So if you're looking to get a gameplay advantage, use Deuteranope or Protanope. The last setting here is a new and secret one. It's called Enable Foot Controller, and what it does is it removes the acceleration that's put by default in your controller movement and aim. There's a similar setting on PC called mouse acceleration, and this is the same thing but for controller. Therefore, if you're on controller and you have this option, you definitely want to turn it on and to put the dead zone and max throttle to 0.01. This will have the same effect as turning mouse acceleration off, giving you more consistent editing and aiming. Overall, those are currently the most optimal PC and console settings. If this video did help you out, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and to turn on post notifications. Thank you to everyone using code Jarian. Remember to enter the 300k subscriber giveaway if you have not. I'm giving away the new Final Mouse and a glorious Model O and O-. All you gotta do is go to my Twitter and follow the steps on this tweet. Otherwise, that's it from me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.